Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The European Union comes to this summit with a message of confidence. The European Union delivered on its commitments made last year, but the global recovery still remains fragile. There are positive signs. On the other hand, growth has lost momentum across a number of large emerging European Union countries. It is therefore important that this summit sends a strong message of confidence, backed up by sound economic strategies, that the recovery will continue. A message that reassures our citizens about the G20's collective determination to tackle the persisting challenges in a cooperative manner. Concretely, we want results in 4 areas. Firstly, all of us must endure in our efforts to inject fresh dynamics in the global economy so that people have a perspective to work and businesses a perspective to invest. This will further enhance confidence at a moment where the recovery is gaining pace in the developed economies. The St. Petersburg Action Plan should be the vehicle for this continued collective action for growth and jobs. We in Europe are seeing a turning point. We should avoid any kind of complacency, namely because of the high level of unemployment, but indeed there are positive signs of recovery. It's critically important in Europe and also in other parts of the world that we make all the efforts to make this recovery sustainable over time. That's why credibility and confidence are key. Secondly, we expect this G20 to maintain momentum on financial regulation and continue filling the blanks in financial markets. Remember, the G20 leaders process was born out of necessity to coordinate an effective global response to the global financial crisis. Our commitments are beyond doubt. Nobody and nothing in financial markets should remain unregulated. And the G20 achievements are remarkable, delivering on a large reform agenda. But G20 needs to continue implementation in order to secure a level playing field. We must address remaining issues like systemic risks and cross-border questions. Thirdly, and probably most importantly, this summit will complete the paradigm shift in taxation. Citizens can be reassured. The days of tax fraud and tax evasion by individuals and by companies are counted. We are introducing more fairness in taxation. G20 should finish what we have started in Europe by making the automatic exchange of information the global standard. I will push to start the automatic exchange of information among G20 members as soon as 2015. We also need to take decisive action against profit shifting and base erosion based on the OECD's excellent work. Finally, our discussions. There is no doubt, open and free trade is the best and indeed the cheapest way to stimulate our economies, support global recovery to the poorest. That's why this summit should confirm the G20's commitment against protectionism, extend and do more to roll back trade restrictive measures. Almost 700 of these measures have been taken since 2008, and only very few have been rolled back. This trend is very difficult and dangerous. G20's commitment can be turned around. We also should give a strong signal to our negotiators in the World Trade Organization to conclude a deal with Zimbabwe in December with trade facilitation at its core. The European Union has a good start to tell in all these 4 areas. Let me just give you a few examples. On financial regulation, Europe has come very far in regulating financial markets so that they can serve the economy and not themselves. About 30 European Union laws since 2008 are being enacted, protecting savers' deposits and making financial products safer and more transparent. We have established a single rule book for all 8,000 banks in the European Union and stepping up our capital requirements in line with G20 commitments. And now Europe is ready to lead sweeping action to bring light into an area that so far has remained in the dark. Protection of savers' deposits. Yesterday, Yesterday, the European Commission presented an ambitious approach for oversight and regulation of shadow banking, including a draft European law on money. On taxation, since 2005, the European Union has been developing an automatic exchange of tax information, and we are acting against corporate tax fraud and tax evasion. We are leaving no stone unturned to detect those individuals and companies who do harm to the public purse and to other citizens. We do not accept that billions are lost when we need it most to invest in our collective future. On trade, Europe remains at the forefront in the fight for open, free and fair trade. We have spared no efforts in WTO to move the door around further. Now we are working hard to come to an agreement in Bali in December with trade facilitation. And we are liberalizing our trade relations with numerous countries and regions in the world, among them Japan, South Korea, Canada and the United States of America. And we are doing this in full consistency with the multilateral trading system. We are also putting in place ambitious trade agreements with some countries in our neighborhood. This should be welcomed as a positive example of the European Union's action to stimulate growth and jobs, not only in these countries, but also in the wider region. We expect that the sovereignty of our neighbors and partners will be fully respected. To conclude, we expect this summit to recognize and further encourage the efforts we are making in Europe. We expect it to be a further lesson for all G20 members in our process of collective learning. This requires willingness to listen, to cooperate and to act. It is about mutual encouragement and support for moving towards recovery together. It is more important than ever that nobody in the G20 relaxes their efforts. After 5 years of existence, people should be able to see that G20 leaders process has proven its relevance and is delivering on its promises. This summit should be a new decisive step towards a global recovery and increased financial stability. One final word. I know Syria is on everyone's mind, and it's also on ours. We need to forge a consensus in the international community on how to respond to the latest developments and also on how to put an end to this conflict. This abhorrent situation remains a stain on the world's conscience. The situation in Syria is indeed the biggest humanitarian tragedy of our times. This week, the appalling number of 2 million Syrian refugees was reached. We all have a duty to act, and the European Union believes that efforts should be developed towards a political solution for the conflict. And the European Union is indeed providing relief, more than 1.3 billion euros so far, for the people on the ground suffering the consequences of this most dramatic situation. I thank you for your attention.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. The last years have demonstrated forcefully that no single nation or even single continent is powerful enough to master alone the storms of the global economy, guard against climate change and extreme poverty, or control tax evasion. Coordinated collective action is paramount, and the G20 has become the most systematic and far-reaching global economic policy coordination exercise. As we gather here in the elegant city of St. Petersburg for this year's G20 summit hosted by Russia, the global economic outlook is steady, but risks and challenges remain. The Eurozone is in a much better shape than a year ago in Los Cabos. We are correcting the internal imbalances, and almost all 28 member states will have positive growth in 2014, with clear signs of improvement already now. Advanced economies are recovering, and emerging markets economies still contribute greatly to the global economic activity. This is also the outcome of the bold actions that the G20 and the G20 members took from 2009 to fight one of the most severe economic and financial crises in living memories. Our decisions saved us from the worst, but we will need to do more to ensure the better. In Europe, our four-strand strategy is bearing fruits. Yet we relentlessly continue our efforts. First, through measures to ensure financial stability and restore normal lending to the economy. Here we have succeeded to reduce financial fragmentation and substantially lower the borrowing for our most fragile countries, the borrowing costs. The existential threat to the Eurozone is over for almost a year now. Second, through structural reforms and gradual fiscal consolidation to restore competitiveness and sound public finances. Here we are already witnessing the first positive results, with higher exports as a result of increased competitiveness also in the weaker economies. And at the same time, public deficits have been halved since 2008. Our new fiscal and economic surveillance system is working and performing. We are now focusing on more structural than on nominal targets in order to give sufficient space for growth and jobs. This flexibility goes hand in hand with structural reforms in the labor and the product markets, while deepening our European single market and creating a real European energy market and digital market in order to enhance our competitiveness. Thirdly, through initiatives at the level of the Union and the Member States with an immediate impact on growth and jobs, notably our Compact for Growth and Jobs of 120 billion euro with a new investment plan and our Youth Employment Initiative. And fourth and finally, through measures to strengthen the architecture of the Economic and Monetary Union, in particular through the rapid completion of a banking union for all Eurozone banks. After having agreed a single European supervisor on all Eurozone banks, we are now taking the next step with the negotiation of a single resolution mechanism to handle banks in trouble. In this difficult economic context, where everyone is making efforts and where budgets are tight, it is unacceptable that many individuals and corporations continue to avoid paying their fair share of taxes. This is the reason why the European Council agreed to step its fight against tax evasion and avoidance by extending automatic exchange of information to a full range of people. This open and inclusive initiative will contribute to speeding up the emergence of automatic exchange of information as a global standard. We are ready to tackle aggressive tax planning and profit shifting, and we expect strong support for the OECD action plan on base erosion and profit shift. Let me also say a few words on Syria. The 21st August chemical attack in the outskirts of Damascus, killing hundreds of people, including many civilians and children, was a blatant violation of international law and a crime against humanity. This atrocious act runs contrary to all values and principles shared by the international community. In the face of this cynical use of weapons of mass destruction, the international community cannot remain idle. We have to show that such crimes are unacceptable and will not be tolerated, to show that there can be no impunity, and to prevent creating a dreadful precedent for the use of chemical weapons in Syria again or elsewhere. We recall the responsibility of the perpetrators of attacks of this type and the role of the International Criminal Court in investigating and judging such acts. While respecting the recent calls for action, we underscore at the same time the need to move forward with addressing the Syrian crisis through the UN process. We note the ongoing UN investigation of the 21st of August attack and further investigations of other chemical weapons attacks carried out in this conflict. We hope a preliminary report of this first investigation could be released as soon as possible. We urge the UN Security Council to unite in its efforts to prevent prevent any further chemical attack. To that effect, we encourage the UN Security Council to fulfill its responsibilities in line with international law and take all initiatives to achieve this goal. Finally, there is no military solution to the Syrian conflict. Only a political solution can end the terrible bloodshed, grave violations of human rights, and the far-reaching destruction of Syria. Too many lives have already been lost, and too many people have suffered for too long and lost too much. The Syrian people deserve a chance to restore peace, reconcile, and rebuild their country. Refugees and those displaced need to see a positive future, to return home so that Syria, its neighboring countries, and the whole region can return to normality. An encompassing diplomatic process leading to a political solution is now more urgent than ever. The initiative for a Geneva II peace conference must move ahead swiftly. The European Union is ready to provide all support needed to achieve a political settlement and work with partners and international actors, particularly the United Nations. The European Union will uphold its commitment as the largest donor to provide aid and assistance to those in need due to the Syrian conflict. It will maintain its readiness to help the recovery, rehabilitation and transition in Syria in accordance with the needs of the Syrian people.
Thank you very much to Presidents Barroso and Van Rompuy for their statements that we will also make available online. We have time for two questions today. The first question to the speaker from Reuters.
Thank you very much. If I may, two questions. First of all, President Barroso, on the economy, obviously there has been a stabilization of the economic situation in Europe. What do you chiefly put that down to? And given the risks that have pertained to the increase in uncertainty in the emerging markets now, and given what you've had to do over the last 3 years in Europe, what advice would you have for emerging economies at this stage and the problems they're going through? If I may, to President Van Rompuy, on Syria, do you have any reason to doubt the credibility of the evidence presented by the United States showing that Assad's forces were responsible for releasing the chemical weapons? And if there is that credible evidence, is it not time for the European Union to show its support for the United States and other countries that seem minded to respond militarily?
Regarding the European economy, it is true that the situation is now much better than before. The prophets of the Euro Judgment Day were wrong. As we have always said, the euro will remain a very stable, strong and credible currency. The resilience of the European economy is confirmed, and indeed, according to our data and the data of all relevant international organizations, our economy is gradually returning to growth. But there is no room for complacency, especially as we are still confronted with very high, unacceptably high levels of unemployment, especially among young people. So it is premature, in my opinion, to declare the crisis over and dealt with. We need to persevere in our strategy for growth and jobs. We need to put a special emphasis on the fight against unemployment. And we must not and will not water down our efforts. The political determination behind the euro has shown that we are ready to go all the way and complete what we started, moving towards a deeply integrated economic and monetary union, including a banking union. So, in fact, it was a set of measures that justifies the progress achieved. Some taken at European level, others taken at national level. At European level, let's not forget where we were 5 years ago, precisely. It's next week. It will be 5 years after the so-called Lehman moment. We had no instruments like the ones we have created now, the European Stability Mechanism, for instance, stronger governance in the euro area, regulation and supervision of the financial markets. All this has been done through the crisis, showing that Europeans have learned the lessons and trying to inject new confidence in the system, not only in the euro area, but in the European Union as a whole. And this issue of confidence is key. The CED announced some measures that also had a very important impact in terms of market confidence. And indeed, collectively, we have delivered on our commitments. At national level also, it is fair to say that countries are developing intense efforts, namely in the program countries. Countries that had historically very high trade imbalances and external deficits are now coming to balance or even surplus situation. Structural reforms are starting to bear fruit, including in the most vulnerable countries, the program countries. And some rebalancing is taking place in the economy of Europe as a whole. So it was not one measure, it was a complex mix of policies that enabled the situation to look now better than before. But we should not relax our efforts, and it is exactly with this message that we come here to the G20, sharing our experience with our colleagues. And it's precisely this point I want to make when you ask me about emerging economies. It is true that some of the big emerging economies are now growing under their growth potential. But I'm confident that it will be possible to bring emerging economies back to their growth potential precisely if we act together and if they address also some of the problems that they have identified themselves. We are not here to give lessons, but to share experiences and discuss collectively the way forward towards growth and jobs. I think if there was a lesson from this crisis is that we are very much interdependent in the 21st century. And the best way to address some of the imbalances in the global economy is precisely working for a sustainable, and I want to underline the word sustainable, growth model. Because we can make it, and we should make it, a win-win situation. Not now going to give a conference, I'm already speaking for too long, but from financial regulation and supervision principles adopted by all of us to open and fair trade, this is the way forward. Of course, afterwards there are specific circumstances that have to be seen. Countries that are facing problems of financial uncertainty should address them as soon as possible, as we have been precisely doing in Europe, and there is still some work to do. So it depends on the specific situation. It's not the same across the continents, but I believe that there are two levels of response. One globally, what we can do to create the best environment for sustainable growth, and also another one at national level. And that is the message we are going to share with our partners and friends from the emerging economies.
Syria. So statements and declassified intelligence reports presented by a number of countries, including some European member states, point to the Syrian regime as responsible for the use of chemical weapons on the 1st of August. So information from a wide variety of sources seems to indicate the Syrian regime is responsible for these attacks, as it is the only one that possesses chemical weapons agents and means of their delivery in a sufficient quantity. At the same time, the United Nations investigators are working on their report. I look forward to the information the UN Secretary General will share with us on this matter later today. And it is important, as I said in my introductory statement, that at least a preliminary report is released as early as possible, and it is doable acting.
Thank you very much. The second and last
again on Syria, if I may. There's one, in particular one member state, France, which is ready for military action to punish Mr. Assad for the use of chemical weapons, you mentioned it. There are other member states which are quite reluctant and waiting for a UN resolution on this matter. How do you want to present a credible, united message of the EU at the summit here? Thank you very much.
First of all countries, big and small, have an internal debate on Syria. Big and small have an internal debate. Second point is that you may have to make a difference between those who want to participate and those who are preparing some kind of political position vis-à-vis eventual attacks. As far as the participation is concerned, at this stage, from the European countries, only France is ready to cooperate at this stage. But the most important thing is that how do we react collectively on eventual decisions made by other countries. And that's what we are preparing. I was working on it the last days. We will coordinate our positions in the coming hours, but it will be very much along the lines that I described in my introductory statement.
Thank you very much. This is what we have time for. Many thanks for coming. We will, as I was saying, make these statements available online.